Hey, welcome in. Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the official Colts podcast. As we close out the regular season, this is week 18. Bill Brooks is here. Casey Vallier. I'm Matt Taylor. Thanks for joining in, whether it's on YouTube or the Colts Audio Network, video or just audio. Billy B, Casey, thanks for being here as always. Bill, how did you ring in the new year a couple nights ago?
How did I ring in the new year? Well, actually at around 10 o'clock, I fell asleep on the couch. Then my wife woke me up and said, you have to stay up until 12 o'clock.
Gave you the nudge.
She gave me a little nudge and said we have to toast at 12 o'clock there. So we had a little toast and hugged and, brought in the new year. And just
you went back to dreamland.
Then I went back to dreamland and we both got up the next morning and just had a regular good New Year's day.
Then it's just a Wednesday, right? Party on, Wayne.
Pretty much.
Love it, dude.
Straight and simple, baby. Straight and simple.
I love it. Casey, how about you, man?
It was funny. My oldest son. So I have 7-year-old twins, boy and a girl. My daughter and my 5-year-old, they were asleep early. My 7-year-old was like, I'm staying up, Dad. I'm going to see this whole thing through. We watched the ball drop, and he goes, okay, what now? I said, that's it. Mm-hmm. I got nothing for you.
He's like, bells and whistles are supposed to go off.
Yeah.
He was like, wow,
there's supposed to be a parade down the street or something.
He was hoping for fireworks outside. I said, in New York, they got the fireworks that we're watching. I said, they're probably not going to be.
It's so anticlimactic because you watch it on TV, and then you get the Jonas Brothers. Like, this is how we're going to kick off 2025. No disrespect to the Jonas Brothers, but I mean,
right?
Hey, to each their own, I suppose.
Yep. How about you?
Same. Yeah, just 12:02. I said, all right.
Good night.
Cashing out. See you tomorrow. Punching out, baby. That's where we're at. All right, we got a busy show today. We're talking about where the state of the Colts, where this team is at. Unfortunately, the playoffs aren't on the table any longer after a very disappointing loss to the New York Giants last week, 45-33. Let me try that again, 45-33, easy for me to say. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about some of the hard truths for this team now, some of the realities that they face going into the 2025 offseason. Also, Alec Pierce is going to join us on the podcast today. Great nugget here that Alec has got a chance to become the first NFL receiver, or I should say any NFL player, right? Mm-hmm. More broader scope, but can become the first player in the NFL to average over 21 yards per catch since 2010. Wow. Fair to guess who those players were? Two guys did it that year, 2010. You have to go back in the Wayback Machine. One guy played for the Eagles.
Jackson.
Yep. One guy played for the Eagles. Right. The other guy played for the Steelers. So you had an all-Philly big play year that year. It was Mike Wallace.
Mike Wallace.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Oh, man.
Wow.
I was thinking, Santonio Holmes, Plaxico Burress.
Yeah.
But Mike Williams. I mean,
all good guesses.
Those are guys that definitely the deep ball was there, and Alec is in some pretty elite company.
The high school
there.
version of you would be disappointed by it. not be able to get that answer. Also, we're going to close out the show talking about where is Anthony Richardson both in the short term and the long term, because he's dealing with back and foot injuries still, and the Colts held a walkthrough on Wednesday. We're taping this on Thursday, and the practice report as of Wednesday says that Anthony Richardson is still DNP in practice, so has missed out on 4 straight practices here in the late part of the season. But I want to talk about these hard truths for the Colts and kind of set them up for you guys, and we're going to debate, again, the harsh realities of this team. So now it's 4 straight years for the Colts missing out on the playoffs. That's going to be the longest drought for the team since they missed out on the postseason from 1988 to 1994. That loss last week also confirms the Colts are going to have an under 500 season for the second time in 3 years, and now they're going to be without a playoff win for the 6th straight season. So when you look at this season in totality, Casey, and then Bill, if you want to chime in too, wherever you want, this is like a psychotherapy. Like sit on the couch and just get out of your system. Yeah. I think that's what a lot of Colts fans want to do and what they want to hear right now. I mean, how many missed chances for this team this year? Obviously, last week was very disappointing. That was kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back. But which game stings the most. And unfortunately, Casey, you got a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different contests you can choose from here.
Yeah, there's a couple that come to mind. I think ultimately where I start, it's the division. It's losing the game to Jacksonville in Week 5 when the Jags were, they were 0-4. And it looked like, here's your chance to really stay inside the race. And then one of those 2 games against Houston, you lost to the Texans twice in a combined 5 points. And you look at the way that Houston is playing down the stretch, you change a couple of those games this season and things are completely different.
Right.
And that doesn't go into account, the game where you play the Packers and they don't have their starting quarterback, or that loss to Denver where you have that big lead, we have the fumble, and then everything went downhill, or the Giants. I go to those divisional games because they just mean so much, and you look at kind of the way the division is going out. Houston is kind of limping into the playoffs, so you could have been able to kind of put them out of their misery.
Yeah, the best they're going to do is 10 wins.
Right, and that's
very
really
achievable
hard.
by
very,
the
very hard. Yeah,
exactly. And for me, I'm going to go back to one of the games you mentioned. I'm going to go back to the Green Bay game.
Yeah.
Malik Willis was playing. He hadn't been there that long, so he doesn't know the offense.
Like 7 days, 18 days.
He just had got there. So then you go against the Green Bay Packers. They rushed for, I think, over 200 yards that game as a team.
In the first half.
Yeah, you can't stop them. So to me, that was a game I thought the Colts let get away. And then the next game for me is the Denver game. I think if you go down to Denver, you take care of business, you do what you're supposed to do, you have an opportunity. If Denver loses one more game, which they did, you control your own destiny after that as far as getting into the playoffs. So to me, I think that was a big game in which
that's
the Colts,
a great point.
Yeah,
great point.
So
had you won that game, you'd be in the driver's seat.
You'd be in the driver's seat. Yeah,
Thursday.
Exactly. So it's one of those things. I think that game to me, where you turned the ball over 5 times and you had a number of penalties. I think it was 8 penalties you had against you that really hurt you. So you hurt yourself in that sense in regards to the Denver Broncos game. So to me, the Broncos game was the one that really, really stands out in my mind.
Yeah, and in all of those games within them, you can say lack of complementary football.
Yeah.
Where one side of the football would show up and the other one just wouldn't, to varying degrees. You talk about that Green Bay game. I mean, the Colts didn't get really any consistent play on offense in that game at all. They lost that game 16-10.
Yep.
The defense was horrible in the first half, right? But even if they have better quarterback play and better overall offensive play in the second half, or really in the totality of that game, they can win. That's a very winnable game. In a game you lose by 6, and they've got a backup quarterback. You look at the Denver game, right, where the defense arguably has its best game of the season, but the offense turns it over 5 times. Then in 2 games this year where Joe Flacco has quarterbacked this team and put up over 30 points and over 300 yards of offense, the defense can't stop 2 of the worst teams in the NFL offensively against the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New York Giants. And both of those teams scored season highs against this Colts defense. So that's where I think Colts fans are really frustrated, is that all season long we're 16 games out of 17 and an 18-week schedule, I should say. Gosh darn. It's just that we're still here. We're still talking about, trying to put this 60-minute game together. And unfortunately, too many of those lost opportunities dooms this team from being able to make the playoffs. And that's going to be, the story of this team this year, is that the lack of complementary football on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, it's hard to really fathom, because last week was literally the perfect picture of what the Colts season was. I mean, Joe Flacco goes out and he does everything right offensively. I mean, you had 1 punt. Rigo had 1 punt and you lose a game. Typically that doesn't happen. But when you look at what Drew Lock was able to do, and like I said, Drew Lock was able to do, this is a guy who's bounced around. He has been a backup quarterback. He has not been, a guy that's even fought for a starting job. And they made him look like Joe Montana last week. And that is something that there are a lot of look-in-the-mirror moments this Colts team's going to have to do over the next, months, because you cannot continue to do that and try and be a playoff team, because that's just not a good way to do it.
Yeah, and also one more thing. You look at, talk about complementary football, special teams. You give a big kickoff return that starts the second half.
Yeah.
The Denver game, you had those
punt returns.
Punt returns.
Yeah, so, those things hurt you. If you can't play complementary football in all 3 phases, it's going to eventually catch up with you.
All right, so that's hard truth number one, talking about all the missed chances this year. The second hard truth is that the culture within the organization has really come under fire these last couple of days, and it's really come up a handful of times before earlier this season. You've had the benching of Anthony Richardson and, needing to point out that he's got to raise his level of attention to detail. Kenny Moore II, after a game, publicly called out the roster for a lack of work ethic and preparation. You've had, this week, DeForest Buckner, after the Giants game, come out and say that, hey, sometimes leaders have to call out some players for a lack of preparation and accountability. Bill, I'll start with you first because you've been inside locker rooms at the professional level. Okay, so you're the perfect guy, within this trio to start here. How concerning have these things been when most of the guys on this roster have been handpicked by the organization, and most of these guys represent a core, a nucleus of players that have been here for a long time to varying degrees on both sides of the football?
Yeah, it is concerning. When you have guys on the team that have been handpicked by the organization and there are guys calling other guys out for lack of preparation, missing assignments, and not just missing assignments in one game, but the same mistake over and over again, that's very concerning. And to me, it's one of those things where, as a locker room, the players know exactly what's going on. They know who's putting in the work. They know who is preparing for a game. And they realize that, sometimes things aren't said right away. And to me, I think that's the mistake. When you don't address it right away and let it go on and go on, then what happens is you get away with it for a couple of games and, hey, okay, we won this game, and even though you made this mistake here, you missed your assignment here, you didn't do this here, and you let that go on. But as players, when the guy makes a mistake, address it right away. And so later on, that won't pop up again, because if you let it go on too long, it's eventually going to bite you in the butt.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to the Colts, I think, this year. A lot of that, you let it go on, and you don't take care of it right away. And to me, that's on the players to step up and say, hey, look, this is not how we do things here. We don't do it this way. This is what we need to do if we want to be successful out there in the football field. And I think that's one of the things they're probably going to have to look at going forward is, let's not let things slide early. Let's get on it right away.
And attention to detail is everything.
It's everything.
You know what I mean? Like, the little things add up to big things, which, again, is the story of this season. All of these missed opportunities, all of these little things that have added up to another year of missing the playoffs, Casey. And listen, when you bench a quarterback who you're trying to turn into a franchise quarterback in Anthony Richardson, you're not going to be able to escape the publicity of a move like that. But the fact that you have at least two other instances where the stuff behind the scenes is now making the papers and the talk shows because it's becoming public, that's what's concerning now going forward.
Yeah, it's all concerning, really. I mean, you think about, I love the word choice you use with handpicked. I mean, this is essentially a homegrown roster, and these are the guys who have, they've built that culture. They have built the standard, if you will, and to be able to you hear the noise that's coming out of it, it is concerning. There's no other way to look at it. And I will say that the guys that are talking, those are the kinds of guys, they're going to get things solved. I mean, DeForest Buckner, Kenny Moore, you want to talk about just natural-born leaders. Those are those guys. So, them coming out and confronting things, I know that they're the type of guys to get things changed, but it's a problem that in this season, multiple times now, you've had this stuff mentioning. It really is. It raises some concern about, what does this team look like moving forward? Because if you're having these issues, how do you know that it's going to be, fixed and all of that moving forward? So it's one of those things that we're going to continue to see the changes that all of that leads to in the next coming months, because it's a massive problem that you have to be able to address if you want to be a team that's going to win at a high level. You can't have that kind of stuff in the locker room.
Yeah.
Oh, by far. I mean, I'm just nodding my head and agreeing with Casey, everything he's saying, because if you want to be that team that wants to be playing in January and hopefully play in February, you have to address those issues right away, and you have to stay on top of it. And you used a perfect phrase, attention to details. I don't care if it's something for as a wide receiver. If you need to be a yard outside the numbers on your alignment, don't be a yard and a half. Be a yard outside the numbers. It's that small of things that make the big difference out there in the football field.
And you can't fool the locker room.
No, you can't. No. That's what I was saying earlier. The players know. You cannot
like
fool
if
the
you're
locker room.
showing up 5 to 7 minutes late, or if you're leaving 5 to 7 minutes early, everyone knows.
Yep.
The locker room knows.
Everyone knows. Like, you may get away with it one time or two times, but in the grand scheme of things, like if you bail out of here early on a Friday, this is a total hypothetical,
right.
Okay? So don't get it misconstrued.
Right.
But I'm just saying, if you do a little thing one or two times, like maybe no one knows about it, if you don't get your workout in, if you don't get your conditioning in, like you're not going to be able to continuously get away with that, and it's going to add up. It's going to add up to the sense where you make a mental error, or you're not in a position to make a play, or you're out of position in terms of alignment and assignment. And all of those things matter, right? We always talk about throughout the course of a game, the game comes down to 5-6 plays. Well, maybe one of those plays is because you had a lack of execution in terms of your preparation during the week. So like all of the little things add up to big things, and you can't fool the locker room in terms of who's dedicated, who's putting in the time, who's putting in the energy to be at their best 100% of the time.
The players know. The players know who's paying attention in meetings. The players know who's going home, studying their playbook, studying the plays, being on top of the plays. They know all those things because it shows up in practice and it shows up in games. And the players know that. So like you said, you cannot fool the locker room. Those guys know.
Absolutely. All right, that's hard truth number 2. This is number 3. We talked about a little bit on defense, giving up 38 points to the Giants last week. They scored 45 total. And again, like you said, Bill, 7 of that came on special teams in the kickoff return to start the second half. But still, the 45-point total for the Giants was more than their point total in their previous 3 games combined. They were averaging 14 points per game. The Colts defense allowed them to score 38 on offense. Big play after big play. The Colts, they've missed the most tackles in the NFL this year by a wide margin. They've given up a plethora of career days to mediocre quarterbacks and to mediocre offenses. They've fallen to 25th in passing, 26th in rushing, 27th in scoring defense. In the last 7 games, they've allowed an average of 30 points per game, fellas. The Titans and Giants generated 8 touchdowns and 1 field goal on 16 possessions, including a pair of kneel downs during the last 6 quarters. Listen, it is what it is, right? We've tried to make sense of it. We've tried to talk about it all season long. But Bill, for you, how disappointing has it been that the overall defensive play this year, considering so many holdovers on that side of the ball, is still where it's at? Because at the beginning of the season, I can raise my hand, and I said all offseason, right, during the spring and OTAs and going into summer and the training camp period, I said that there's just way too much individual talent on that side of the ball to be finishing 28th in points allowed in each of the previous 2 seasons, and we're still in that same neighborhood. I think that's the frustrating part. Like, I don't have an answer for it.
Right. It's hard to find an answer, especially when, these guys have been in the system for a while now.
Yeah.
They know the system. They understand the system. They're veterans. They have veteran presence out there, so they know what it takes to win football games. And it seems like it's continuously, if it's missed tackles or if it's giving up explosive plays or whatever, it's just hasn't caught on to the team yet that, hey, look, we have to do a better job defensively to stop these guys. And you mentioned the stats. I mean, they give up over 360 yards a game. I mean, that's just unbelievable. I mean, you're 29th in the league with that. You give up 133 yards rushing per game. You're 26 with that.
Yeah.
So those are the things.
That number's actually coming down.
Right, exactly, from when it was. So it's one of those things where I did not expect that going into the season, especially with the veterans they had in the team, especially the veterans up front on the defensive line and at linebacker. So that surprises me quite a bit, and it's something that I can't put my finger on. I don't know why it's happening that way. You hope it would improve with the veterans on the team and being in the same system for a few years, that they would be a little bit better than that.
Yeah, you talk about realities, Casey. I mean, Gus Bradley this week called the performance against the Giants, he called it embarrassing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's good that you have a leader,
Yes.
taking accountability as far as that is concerned. And then you had Zaire Franklin. He had to own up to calling out the Giants earlier this season. He's got his podcast, and he said some things about always wanting to play a team like the Giants because they're not very good. And,
Yeah. Way to get his stats up. And,
exactly. So, I mean, you've had some guys, I think, learn some very valuable lessons on and off the field this year in terms of, again, accountability and words and just the persona of
Yeah.
what you're trying to portray out there.
Yeah, it's all hard. The one thing that always gets me back to when you look at the numbers, and I love that you mentioned earlier that there's too much individual talent defensively.
Well, let's just go through it. Buckner, Stewart.
Yeah,
Two of the
they're
best
elite.
defensive
Yes, they're
tackles
elite.
in the game,
Yes.
right? I think you have above average players in Kwity Paye and Samson Ebukam when he's healthy. Obviously, he's
Right.
I probably shouldn't even brought him up this year because he hasn't played a single down.
Right.
But I just mean like in the future, you've
Right.
got a player like that you can build around. And he's still under contract. I mean, I think Zaire Franklin and E.J. Speed are two really good linebackers.
Yep.
I think they've struggled in coverage in the middle of the field this year. In the back end, you've got Pro Bowl players and Pro Bowl caliber players, and Julian Blackmon and Kenny Moore II. That's why it's so mystifying.
And that's where I wanted to go is they're all here. They're all active and they're all playing. I mean, you have the
Yeah.
loss of Juju Brents, who you counted on to be kind of your second corner. But I think we would all agree that Jalen Jones has played very, very well, and same with Samuel Womack. So you lost Juju, but you didn't really feel like you lost too much because of the play that everybody else stepped in. You mentioned the linebackers. They played essentially every game. EJ missed a couple. But really, Samson Ebukam is the only real guy that you were counting on a lot that you didn't see the production from the guys stepping in. So you put all of that. That's where the biggest area that I scratch my head at, because you have very talented players, and in some of their own regards, they're having great years. I mean, I think DeForest Buckner, he missed essentially 6 games, but he put up a great season.
Yeah.
Zaire Franklin just got named to his first Pro Bowl. Kenny Moore looked like Kenny Moore. And yet it's not able to come together and have the total defense like you need it to be. So it's definitely something that I can't wrap my mind around the reasons why it didn't make this defense better, but it definitely didn't.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, that's a really tough discussion.
Yeah.
It really is.
yeah.
I mean, that's the whole essence of the segment.
That's right.
It's hard
Right.
truths.
It is hard.
But it's
Yeah.
hard to. It's hard to also, like you said, it's hard to find an answer. What is
Yeah.
the answer? Why the team is played that way from a defensive standpoint? It's tough to find an answer. I mean, there's things we could say. They're not this on the run, they're not this against the pass. But what is the reason why?
Right.
What is the reason why these talented individuals, which they all are talented,
Yeah.
and they play hard, but it just didn't show up on the field enough?
And then this is where, you go to social media and you hear blow it up, get rid of it. I mean, you got the pieces in place. We just laid out the guy. I mean, it's hard to look at this, especially if we're sticking defensively. You look at the roster and you say, okay, I don't want that guy. Who are those guys? Because you've got the pieces in place. And
you also signed a lot of them in the
Yes.
offseason,
Yes.
brought them back.
And
let's also keep in mind, like if you blow the whole thing up, it's hard to replace guys
Very
of that
much.
caliber
Yeah.
in one offseason.
Exactly. It's going to take time.
I mean, it is a head scratching thing, and
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up Gus Bradley. Tip of the cap for him to acknowledge what happened, because at the end of the day, Gus Bradley has been a very good defensive mind for a long time in this league. So you had all of that with a veteran defensive coordinator who has had success. It's all just, it is something where I'm sure I don't have the answer. Bill, you probably don't have the
No.
answer. I don't know what you do. It's very difficult to figure out how to make this defense not be in the bottom and all of those major categories, which is kind of, in essence, the reason why you're struggling to make the postseason year in, year out over the last handful of years, because that constant consistency defensively just hasn't been there.
Yeah. Well, those are the hard truths right there. 3 of them that, the Colts are having to deal with in terms of realities. Let's go one positive hard truth. Alec Pierce is a stud.
Yes.
Career high, 767 yards. Let's pivot. Let's talk about some positive things the Colts can build on going into Week 18, trying to close out the season strong against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 14 definitely qualifies, or I should say he should be placed in that bucket. And we talked earlier today on the Official Colts podcast about his great season and how he's trying to close out the season strong. All right, let's get it going now with Colts wide receiver Alec Pierce, who's fresh off 6 catches, 122 yards, and a touchdown against the New York Giants last week. Alec, huge game for you. What went into that huge performance last Sunday?
Yeah, I think I got a lot of opportunities early in the game, and we had some good schemes called up, and Joe just gave me good opportunities, and, I tried to make the plays for the team. Yeah.
On the season, 767 yards, career high for you. I know you're not thinking about that now. You're going to have more time starting next week to begin reflecting on that. But what have you made of this third year in the NFL, your growth that's led to career highs in terms of output?
Yeah, I've just been trying to, take things day by day and really focus on making the most of every opportunity given to me, controlling the controllables, and just every time I get a chance, whether it's in practice or in the game, because really it all starts in practice. You make the play in practice, they're more likely to call it in the game. So that's really kind of started from OTAs in camp and just carried on to the season.
All right, on the season, you're averaging 21.9 yards per catch. If you can hold that up on Sunday, which there's no doubt you can, you will be the first player in the NFL to average over 21 yards per catch since 2010. How important are those explosives? We talk about it every single year. Got to get those chunk plays, right? It's hard to score on 10, 12, 14 play drives. Those explosive plays in terms of what you can add to this offense, how imperative are those?
They're super important. That's something I take pride in myself, is being an explosive threat. Someone who can just instantly change the game, change the drive, get, basically a spark plug, get things going, start things up. So, that's I'm just happy I'm been able to do that this year. I think the coaches have done a good job kind of scheming some different types of things up to get deep and get down the field. And then, the quarterbacks have been on the money with the ball all year. And then obviously, too, it takes a protection for those deep shots. It's usually going to be a little bit longer. Quarterbacks going to be back there patting the ball a little bit. So that speaks to the O-line and running backs and everyone just protecting tight ends. So.
Those deep shots, whether they're down the sideline or in the middle of the field, we call them 50-50 balls. But for you, they're more like 80-20, 90-10. What is your confidence level? You got to have the skill and the physical assets to be able to go and make those plays, which you do, but you also have to have a belief. What's your confidence level in yourself to be able to routinely, as you do, haul those big plays in?
Yeah, very confident. I always I pride myself on, and I always tell the quarterbacks this, you throw the ball to me, it's either going to be, I'm going to catch it, it's going to be a pass interference, or at worst, it's just going to be incomplete.
Which was the case, and you also had a 44-yard pass interference penalty against the Giants.
I know I should have caught that ball too. But, I definitely, the one thing that scares coaches and quarterbacks from throwing the ball downfield to you is the interception.
Right, the risk.
So I always just try to make sure I let them know I'm not gonna let that happen. As long as it's up to me, as long as it's not the safety come flying in and pick it off, But if it's 1-on-1, cornerback, I'm gonna make sure I do everything I can to not let him catch the ball.
Joe Flacco is a really good deep ball thrower. Anthony Richardson is too.
Yeah.
But earlier this week, I asked Joe about those types of plays and throwing the ball up to you and how important those are and, what goes into taking those shots. And he had a really interesting quote. He said, "The offense isn't good because we're explosive. We're explosive because the offense is good. We do all the little things right that open the door for those deep shots." What do you think he means by that?
I think he means those deep shots take a lot of setting up to do. So we've been running the ball well, and then I think they give a good play fake. A lot of times it's play action that we're hitting deep. So the defense is ready for the run. The play action gets them a little bit,
right?
And then obviously the up front they got to be good to protect that long. So it kind of takes a whole. It's not just the deep shot. It's not just the explosive play. It's the whole offense and even the plays before that setting it up.
All right, last couple of things with Alec Pierce with us. Week 18 is here. I know it's a difficult balance to know the fact that you're not going to make the playoffs, but also you got to close out the season strong, right? You got to get a win to set the tone for what hopefully is a really good and productive offseason.
Yeah.
What's that mindset, and how difficult is it to balance those things on a tough week, again, knowing that the postseason is just not a reality for this team?
Yeah, we kind of talked about it a little bit as a team, but just, we can't control what's in the past. All we got is this one last opportunity left, and the nature of this league. But we're not going to be the same team next year. So this is one last opportunity to go out here,
right,
as teammates, and get a win in Lucas Oil.
Yeah, with that in mind too. Again, the finality of the season's coming up on Sunday. How tough is it to come to realization that a lot of these guys in this locker room, I mean, you go to battle with, man. You guys spend 9-10 hours a day around each other, and you've been doing that now for 6.5 months. How tough is it to realize that some of these guys that you do that with just aren't going to be back in this locker room next year? That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, it's tough, but that's the reality of football. I dealt with that for even going back to college, high school. The team changes every year, so it's tough, but it's what it is.
No question about it. Lastly, again, I only ask you this question because the conclusion of the season comes after Week 18. How will you balance the offseason? What are some things that you want to fine-tune and get into a rhythm to improve upon what you've already established in 3 years?
Yeah, just want to work on a lot of things training-wise, receiver-wise. I was pretty proud. I think I got a little bit stronger last year, and I think it helped my play. So, that'll just remain an emphasis, getting in the gym, getting faster, stronger. But then just receiver-wise, I want to get better after the catch. I want to get better on, the short intermediate routes, creating separation, beating press coverage.
Right.
So that's all my emphasis.
No doubt about it, man. One of the best in the locker room right there. That's Alec Pierce. We call him the Midwestern Missile. Huge yards per catch. The deep ball threat for the Colts inside the passing game, man. Always appreciate the time, and best of luck.
You.
Yeah, close out the season strong.
Thank you.
The great Alec Pierce right there, the Midwestern Missile. You fellas like that?
I like that when you said that the other day.
Yeah.
I like that.
Done.
I asked him 6 weeks ago, I said, do you have a nickname? He goes, nah, I can't give myself a nickname. A nickname has to come from somebody else, which I totally agree with.
Yes.
No one should give themselves a moniker. It's like Jimmy Mad Dog Mata started calling himself Dog in 6th grade. You can't give yourself a nickname, but I guess it worked in that regard.
Him,
but I think the Midwestern Missile,
it's
right?
Great.
From Chicago area, went to Cincinnati, now obviously is thriving with the Colts. Yeah. Mr. Midwest, and he's a missile down the field in the big play game.
I loved it when I heard that over the air. When you called it, I love that. It's perfect name for him, perfect nickname for him, and hopefully he likes it, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, baby. So good luck to him, as we said, trying to set the NFL record this year for yards per catch at over 21. So he needs another big game to do that, and I think he's in store for one. All right, let's close out the show. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the Jacksonville Jaguars, okay? I mean, I think a lot of fans don't want that. I mean, it's not a meaningless game in the sense that it doesn't matter, because it does. You're playing for pride. You're playing for divisional bragging rights. But both teams have been eliminated from postseason play. And this is our last podcast of the regular season on the official Colts podcast with us, fellas. So let's spend some time talking about the bigger picture, if you will, in Anthony Richardson. So he met with reporters on Wednesday and said his back spasms that held him out of last week's game stem from an issue with a disc in his lower back, and that's something that's bothered him now for a long time. His back injury, initially described as soreness last week, severely limited his mobility last week, and he said there was a point last week where he could barely stand up, which is not good. So he said that he's dealt with muscle soreness in his back since he was about in middle school, 8th grade area, but an MRI last week revealed a disc issue that has to be managed and maintained, I should say. So even though, let's take this one at a time. Okay, so again, we don't know about his availability for Sunday's Week 18 game against Jacksonville. So let's start there. Casey, even though the playoffs aren't obtainable, how important is it for Richardson to play in this game when, again, in the bigger picture, this is a game that is not going to determine the postseason fate for the Colts.
Yeah, I think it's massive because you cannot replicate the reps you get in game action anywhere else. So one of the things we've talked about over the course of the 2 years now that Anthony has been in the building is the lack of reps he got after high school. And then after his rookie year, he didn't get those reps due to the shoulder injury. So ultimately, I think it is imperative for the reps, being able to be in the huddle.
Going into the offseason.
Yeah. And in large part, that's where this is two-part, if he's healthy.
Yes.
Because if he's not.
If he's compromised, no.
Right.
Exactly.
I don't want that because you want him to be able to focus on football as much as he can in the offseason.
Right, and not have to rehab.
Right. We don't. So
he's already done that.
It's a twofold. If he's healthy and he can play, you want him to play. If he's not, don't play him. Let him play compromised because we want him to be able during the offseason to focus everything he can on football and not rehab.
Yeah. All right. The second part of this is now that he's had this or does have this lingering back issue, Bill, he's missed prior to this week. We don't know about his availability yet again, but he's missed 16 of a possible 33 games in his young career, 4 separate injuries, concussion, shoulder injury. He has the hip and the oblique earlier on this season, now dealing with back spasms and a foot injury. How concerning is this in terms of his long-term viability? How concerning is it that his rap sheet in terms of injuries is so long in such a short period of time in the NFL?
It's a concern. I think it's a concern. Anytime you have any player that is hurt and is unable to play in games and his availability is not there for the team, it's a concern because it's something that from here on out they're going to have to monitor to make sure that, he can stay healthy. And that might change a little bit of how Shane Steichen calls the game.
And that's what you don't want.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's what you don't want. Yeah. So it is a concern moving forward to see how they can manage these issues in regards to him being hurt or getting hurt in the game or getting hurt, his back's bothering him, his foot is bothering him, whatever it may be.
Right.
So it is a concern, something that they're going to have to make sure that they monitor very closely to make sure that he can be available to play. And hopefully that, it doesn't change his playing style out there in the football field.
Well, this was the quote that really stood out to me yesterday. Again, Anthony Richardson spoke to reporters. He said, quote, he's talking about the back injury. I never really viewed it as a problem. I just thought it was more so just muscle tightness from working out and running a lot. It might be chronic, but there's plenty of ways to prevent it going forward in the future. Now that I know what it is, I can find certain ways to stay out of certain positions, just make sure I'm healthy 100%. That goes back to playing style. That goes back to when you have Anthony Richardson out there, fellas, you want him to be wide open in terms of what he can do. We know about his struggles right now passing the football in terms of accuracy, and the passer rating numbers are what they are. Right now, he's a really good wildcat quarterback, running the football, throws the deep ball. But that quote right there compromises what you can do potentially with Anthony Richardson out of trying to make sure he's healthy and available, if you follow what I'm saying.
No, absolutely. And that is, that goes back to what Bill said. You don't want to have to change what Anthony is and where he excels in because
that's why you drafted him.
It goes back to this. You didn't draft Anthony Richardson for all that he does to just make him a drop back pocket passing quarterback.
Right.
And that's where all of these things now, we don't know what those what he's able to do to limit, those positions. We don't know what all that entails, but it does give you a little bit of concern because that's where you initially go to is how drastically does that change his game? You would think it would be not putting myself into situations of getting hit,
right?
And that's kind of where his game is when it's all games on the line. Definitely, I mean, we saw it a handful of times this year. When you need to get a first down, who's the guy you want the ball in his hands? It's Anthony. You want him to be able to make, he's okay to lower his shoulder and make that initial contact.
Run a guy over the goal line.
That's what he does. I mean, you have that weapon. You want to be able to utilize it.
Yeah.
So it definitely is something that we're going to have to monitor for sure.
This is the franchise dilemma now.
Yeah.
And it was and then Anthony came back, and they kind of let the governor off a little bit,
Right.
and they were running him a little bit more. Plus, he was staying healthy, which
Yes.
was great.
Yes.
But now, something like this, anytime you hear the word chronic
Yeah.
in a back,
Yeah.
that you have to start going, oh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But hopefully they've caught, I mean, he's young enough, right? He's 22 years old. Hopefully they've caught this thing in terms of how they can manage it going forward, but you just don't want it to limit what makes him great, and that's his ability to run with the football. And when you do that, you're going to take some contact.
Exactly. And also it goes to making smart decisions out there. When I think Anthony came back from his benching, I thought some of the things that he did on the football field, he made smart decisions.
Yeah.
When he needed to get down, he got down. When he needed to get out of bounds, he got out of bounds. When
Yeah.
he needed to throw the ball away, he threw the ball away.
And the good thing about this injury is that it doesn't stem from taking a bad hit
Exactly.
from a bad decision.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's a positive.
Yeah.
So when you look at it that way, so I think there are things he can do, but you still don't want to take away what Anthony does well. And part of what he does well is run the ball with his feet.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, lastly, wrapping up here again, I only bring this up because we know there's going to be some finale to the season after Week 18, right? There's going to be a conclusion after the last game of the regular season. Question for both of you guys when it comes to Anthony Richardson. How would you map out his offseason? As long as he's healthy, which is, it wasn't the case last year because he couldn't start rehabbing, or I should say he couldn't start throwing because of the rehab until about mid-February. How would you map out his offseason in order to grow, to get better, and become a better quarterback next year?
It's a great question because I'm not a quarterback guru. I'm not a coach, but
I thought you were a guru.
You thought I
Casey, I thought you were the quarterback guru.
And this is like I said, this is something that I am not super privy on what these drills or so looks like. When you look at Anthony Richardson, there's a couple things you can say. We know he runs the football well and he throws the deep ball. I would put him up there in the elite category. I mean, it can change a game on how he can just, complete the deep pass. But when it comes to playing quarterback, there is so much that goes into it in some ways, making the layups. So there's a lot of me that is where my dedication this offseason is making sure those short and intermediate passing, you take a major stride getting better in that area.
Intermediate game.
The intermediate game, I think that is going to be critical for Anthony Richardson to continue to develop because he's not a finished product. We've mentioned he is 22. He has not played that much football since high school. There is still a massive arrow up on what this could end up being, but you've got to be able to make your entire game, you got to elevate your entire game, but I would start with those intermediate because we know what he can do with the deep ball. We know what he can do with his legs, but if you can make all of that, a positive intermediate too, it really makes AR a dynamic weapon in the backfield. Yeah.
I think at first, whenever the season's over for him, or if he's playing this game or he's not going to play this game, I think it takes a little time off. Just take a little time off, relax. I'm not saying take 3 months off, but take a little time off and relax, and then let's get back into it. And to me, I think getting back into it is you start with the fundamentals. You start with the fundamentals. Just work on the fundamentals, and that should become a habit for you, that when you execute the fundamentals, every time you play in the game, it becomes a habit to you. So work on the fundamentals. If it's footwork, if it's body position, arm position, wherever it may be, work on those things. And then, as you said, Casey, work on the short to intermediate passes. To me, those are things I think that if he can work on those and improve on that, on the consistency, on how successful he is on short and intermediate passes, that will go a long way in his game. And if he continues to does that, work with his individual coach during this time where he can't work here at the facility or with the coaches here.
Yeah.
Work with your personal coach and get those things under control so that when it comes time to come into the season, come into OTAs, come into minicamp or whatever it is, that he's ready to go and he knows what he's doing. So to me, I think that's going to be a big, big part. Work on your fundamentals. Work on the basic things because to me, those things are the foundation of how well you can be in regards to excelling out there in the football field.
And I think also like making sure that plan is, organizational down.
Yeah.
Make sure it is, everybody is on the same page on this is where we need to be. This and have
this is how we teach
this
it.
is how we and I think that is not saying that it hasn't been there. I'm not at all, this is all I'm just saying that it needs to be everybody involved on the same page so that once that OTAs start and training camp starts, you're able to hit the ground running already moving on the same page because you've been working side by side during this whole time, whether or not you're physically side by side, being able to stay in lockstep on where you are so that you can just continue to grow because you don't want to see that when we come in OTAs, it's, trying to, get back up to speed here. I think everything needs to be.
Well, that's the hard part is because they can't have contact with him until he comes back for the spring.
Right, exactly.
And so a lot of this stuff's going to have to be on his own.
Correct.
With his own, trainers, with his own throwing mechanic folks and things like that, which a lot of quarterbacks use. But a lot of this is going to have to be on Anthony Richardson setting a plan for himself and the Colts having input within that plan until he comes back into the building in April.
Exactly. And plus also, I think, for him, Anthony, now that he has an understanding of the offense, so he knows what to look for. He knows what plays are coming in regards to, okay, where this player is going to be, where the running back is going to be, where the tight end is going to be, where this wide receiver is going to be.
Yep.
Now you have that and you understand that. So when you're in the offseason, you can call your other receiver, say, look, you know what? Let's have a throwing session down here in Florida. Or let's have a throwing session wherever for a number of guys to come down. Okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to throw the ball in air. We're going to run like a 7-on-7 on air.
Yeah.
This is the play I'm calling. The play last year, these are the plays we had last year.
Yep.
We're going to call some of the plays. Let's run it. We're going to run it. It's this coverage out there. They ran in cover 2. So this is what I need to look for. I need to look for this guy over here, or this is my first read. This is my second read. Now that he has a good understanding of the playbook, he can do those things out there and just continue to work on things. And you see him, you rep him, you see him, you rep him, you see him, you rep him. Then it becomes easier for you once you get into OTAs and minicamp.
And I don't want to, put pressure on anything either, but we all know what it is. I mean, this is entering the third year of a rookie contract.
Window of opportunity.
This is it. This is a massive offseason for Anthony Richardson and the organization. I mean, this is a massive window. So this is the offseason that is the most important one that Anthony Richardson has been with as a professional athlete. So this is a big one. This is a really, really big one for Anthony and for this organization to, you talk about your window of opportunity. This is also where when you start thinking financials, all of those start to come into play.
You'll have to make decisions on those things after year 3.
You're going to have to start making those. So it's a big one. This is a really, really big one.
I like it. You guys brought the heat today, man. You did. We got in some hard truths. We talked about the short term and the long term from Anthony Richardson, and hopefully the Colts can close out the season. Take some solace out of the fact of beating the Jacksonville Jaguars in week number 18. Bill Brooks, Casey Vallier, I'm Matt Taylor. Fellas, again, Happy New Year to you, and thanks for making this podcast. So much fun, and so enjoyable and easy, for 18 weeks.
It's been a lot of fun, man. I appreciate both of you guys.
I appreciate both of you guys, and I could tell you before, you guys just hunker down in your little office and get to work, and I'd love to see it, man. Thanks a lot for everything. I appreciate it.
You. Thanks so much, Bill. Thank you to Ava behind the scenes on the 1s and 2s on YouTube and the Colts Audio Network, and thank you, the audience, for always engaging with us, again, whether it be on YouTube with video or audio on the Colts Audio Network. That's going to do it for us. Again, Billy Brooks, Casey Vallier, I'm Matt Taylor. Thanks for watching. Go Colts Week 18, Colts and Jaguars, and we'll talk to you next time here on the official Colts podcast. So long.